God is a God of redemption. We say this a lot. We teach it, we preach it. I have my own story of being deported from America, but God has restored me so that I can minister to people and testify about Him through my story. What is your redemption story? Well, tell us about it in the comment, and we'll be right back with some powerful stories of God's redemption. Hey friends, welcome back to Learn Together. I'm your host, Sehi Doran, and I am super excited to continue to grow and learn with you in this ministerial journey. Today, we're going to have some rough conversations, but not in a sense it is a challenging conversation, but it's a difficult stories of real people, but how God redeemed their stories to minister to many, many people. Well, we're going to jump from coast to coast. So first of all, I'm going to introduce to you an amazing minister, a friend of mine, Jillian Pelkey. She is from New York, which I've never been there just yet. I'm going to call her up and let's welcome her to our conversation. Hell, Jill, how are you doing?
Hi, how are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. It sounds like we need to get you to New York if you haven't
I
been
know.
here yet.
All right, take me there. Well, we're celebrating Mother's Day this month, right? And so this is a very special month to you and to me, because we are mothers, right? But this is not the only reason why this month is meaningful for you. But before we ask you like several questions, why don't you kind of briefly tell us about your current ministry?
Absolutely. So I am the director of the New York Network of Women Ministers, and I've been in that role for 3 years. And that it feels like a passion project to me because I love it so much. I also serve as the associate pastor of a church where my husband's the lead pastor, and we're here in Central New York at Kirkland Life Church.
Wow. Thank you so much for your obedience and doing this hard work. And yeah, you're right. This is a passion ministry, right? Passion project. I love doing this too. So here, I have 3 questions for you. So let's kick it off with the first one. So Mother's Day is this month, right? But just like some people call Valentine's Day a single awareness day, Mother's Day can evoke some difficult emotions and reactions for some people. Maybe women who couldn't have, children or who have gone through abortion and stuff like that. You do have some experience with working with women who were either considering abortion or who are dealing with some guilt and pain of post abortion. So could you just kind of walk us through that story and how you ended up working with them and how it impacted your faith and journey as a minister today?
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to start with the part of your question where you asked how I ended up working with women in these different situations. It was between my junior and senior year of college. I was at Bible College at North Point, and I was pursuing pastoral ministry. It was that summer between where my now husband was doing an internship and I became pregnant. Went back to school not knowing I was pregnant. It's my senior year. I'm a class officer. I'm doing all kinds of ministry. Over the summer, I worked with kids and youth, and in school, I had all kinds of responsibilities. And I realized I was pregnant. So one of my mentors was our class advisor, who was the president's wife. So of all people, she's the one who brought me to a doctor's clinic as a senior Bible college student. And the doctor took me into a room after I got the results of my test and said, "You are indeed pregnant." And for the next 45 minutes, the doctor tried to convince me that having an abortion was the best option for me. The doctor talked about how my dreams and my goals were more important than a clump of cells that was growing inside of me, and kept trying to convince me. I kept trying to leave the room and he wouldn't let me. He kept saying, "No, I
Wow.
feel like I need to tell you this." And so 45 minutes later, I come out of the doctor's office, flush, crying, and just got hugs from the people in the waiting room. And from there, we moved into a time where we were kicked out of Bible college, my now husband and I. And it was a very vulnerable time for us. It was a really hard time. But I had this
Yeah.
moment when we were packing up our stuff, getting to ready to leave school. And I went and sat in my car and I cried out to God and I said, God, if I ever needed you, I need you right now. And the Lord answered me so clearly and said, I want you to remember and write down what you're going through because I'm going to use it. And I thought, God, no, use anything. You could have anything in my life, but please don't use this. Please just ignore this. Can we get over this as fast as we can? And the Lord said, I'm going to use this. So, long story short, John and I got married. My now husband, and I got married. We had a beautiful baby boy named Luke, who is now 18 years old and headed off to Southeastern to pursue his credentials and his ministry in the
Wow.
fall. But back up a little bit, it was still hard when we go through the actual practical way of living this out. It was very, very difficult. Um, 10 years after, and there's so many details in there, but 10 years after, my husband took a position in a new town. I wasn't sure what God had for me in this new town. Someone came up to me and said, there's a position open for the executive director of a pregnancy care center. I had never really heard of a pregnancy care center, started to look into it. And what my responsibility was is I got to sit in rooms with women who were in the exact same place I was and speak life instead of death over
Wow.
their choices. And God turned it 100, degrees, turned me right around 360 degrees and said, I'm going to use you in the very area where you thought that there was the biggest loss. It was a powerful thing. The thing that I think is so important for us to hear as ministers, as pastors and leaders in the church, the statistic is that 1 in 4 women have had an abortion. 1 in 4.
Wow.
But here's what's more shocking. 60% of those women identify as Christians, self-identify as Christians. 60% of women having abortions are Christians. There are so many reasons why, and I would love to dive into the reasons why
Mm.
that happens. And um, the best story I have for that is one day working at the pregnancy care center, a woman brought another woman in and leaned over the counter to me and she said, don't you just think that these women having abortions are terrible? And she said,
Mm.
aren't they the worst? Isn't this the worst? And the Holy
Right.
Spirit came over me and I turned back to her. I said, these are hard decisions. These are decisions I, realize are so difficult and so hard. And no, I don't hate these women. I think they are in hard, hard places. And she looked at me and her face softened and she said, really? And she began to cry and she said, I had an abortion, but I never could
Oh,
tell
wow.
anyone because I was a Christian and I didn't want anyone to think badly of me. So over the course of the next few months, she and I worked through a book called Forgiven and Set Free. As she brought her friend in, secretly, we worked on this book and worked through the pain and trauma of having had an abortion. People come at all ages to get healing from abortion. There was a woman in her 80s who would come into our center and work through this healing because the process is so important, and the heaviness, the guilt, and the shame doesn't leave us until we work through it. And so there are so many answers, and there's so much power in realizing that there are women in every single congregation who are dealing with this in some way, especially pastors' kids, especially leaders'
Mm.
kids. And so we need to be open and ready to not look at sin, especially abortion is not the unpardonable sin. Abortion
Right.
is not the worst of the worst. It's a sin like any other sin, and it's forgiven, and you could be set free from it. So that's
Wow.
the beginning part of my story.
That is so powerful. Just to know that there's like 60% of Christian women go through abortion, and you're right. This is not a sin that God cannot forgive. God does redeem, and look at your story and how God turned it around 180 and then using it for his glory. He is so faithful. Wow. I think so, but your story doesn't end there, obviously, because God redeemed your story from being in a Bible college student, getting pregnant, but that wasn't the end of it. God continued to use you. So, how did God moved you from there into where you're at today? Now you're co-pastoring,
Mhm.
um, and you have special eyes to see that when you see women, you're not just seeing just cleaned up kind of like
Mhm.
perfect Christian girls, right? You see, like some of them have broken stories. So, how
Mhm.
does it help you be a leader in ministry?
I'll tell you two things that are super important. One was um, when I came home from Bible college, I went to my pastor and explained to him what was going on. And he was so kind and so good. And he said, you know what we're going to do is we're going to just keep this quiet. People are going to find out. Just keep going. And we're here to support you 100%. And for some reason, the Holy Spirit said to me, ask if you can get up and apologize to the church. And he agreed to it. And so one Sunday, I got up in front of the church and I said, I want to apologize because I worked with kids, I worked with youth, I did all these things all summer long, and I wasn't living a life that was appropriate. And I'm crying, and I said, and I'm pregnant. And a woman in the church stood right up in the middle of me talking and said, I forgive you. We forgive you. And it was this powerful moment. And so the pastor said, I want all the women of the church to gather around Jill. We're going to sing some songs and pray for her. So as these women are praying for me, I open my eyes and I look down this line of women just gathered around, just laying hands on me, this sinner that doesn't deserve it, that ruins stuff, ruin things. They have to explain to their kids who I am and why I'm back from school. I started to see, like with spiritual eyes for the first time, that this one woman to the side of me, her son doesn't have the same last name of her as her. To see this woman was divorced. And these were powerful women of God.
Yeah.
And they all had backgrounds and stories. And for once I could see that serving God wasn't just this polished, we don't come to God perfect, we come to God broken. The other part of that was a freedom for me is I thought I was ruined. I thought, this is it. I've sinned. I'm pregnant. I'm visually pregnant. I'm never going to work in ministry. I'm never going to be a force for God. Like, I've ruined my chance. I just want to sit in the back row now. I'm just going to be invisible. I love God so much. I'm just going to sit here and do whatever I can. But God wooed us and called us back to himself. We were so broke. We were college students. We had no money. My husband and I were looking for our first apartment, and we couldn't find anything. We couldn't afford anything. Long story short, we go through this one apartment. We can't afford it. It's beautiful, beautiful apartment. I can't afford it. We go home, and the landlord calls us and says, I don't know anything about you guys, but I'm a Christian and I'm a person of prayer, and God told me to give you this apartment for whatever you can afford. God gave us a gift in the midst of our brokenness. God stepped towards us when he should have stepped away from us. He should have said, sinners, we're done with you. But I learned the love of God. And I learned the love of God from the people in my church who gave me the biggest baby shower I've still yet to see today. I was surrounded by love. Yeah, sure, there were people that said horrible things, but I was surrounded by love, by people who stood up to say, I forgive you, who gave me things, who came around me, who took me out for lunch. And we have a choice as church people to be those people, or to turn up our noses and say, I knew you were going to fall. I knew you were going to, I was a Christian. And I fell, and I got back up because I was so in love with Jesus that I could do nothing else. And so now when I worked at the pregnancy care center, I preached across the whole county. And as I would go different places to preach, people knew I was there to talk about abortion and about life and God's view on life. And I could visually see in the congregation people who have had abortions. They would put their heads down. They wouldn't be able to come even close to my display table because the hurt was so visible to me. And I think that it can be visible to us as leaders if we would just look. And we have to be, this is so important, we have to be so careful how we preach. We preach against abortion, but we're not preaching against people. And so many times, because of our stance on abortion, people don't feel like they can come forward and say, I've been there, I've done that. We have to be so loving to the 60% of people who have had abortions who are Christians. It's not a secret. We have to allow people to bring their sin into the light.
Right. That is so true, because the church is a place where broken people come and be healed. So if we don't bring that pain or the hurt or this trauma, where can they turn to, right? So church is such an important place, and we have such an important role. Oh man, when you said a lady got up and said, I forgive you, man, my heart, I just started to cry. This is such a beautiful display of God's unconditional love. God's unconditional love, and his grace is sufficient. Wow. So for those ladies that are listening, I'm sure there's somebody who have gone through abortion and still carrying this guilt. I'm so glad that you're here, Jillian, and telling your story of God's redemption. So what would you like to say to these women, and how could church come alongside them? You kind of briefly mentioned them, but what is something that we can do to walk by them, walk alongside them toward redemption?
I think, Sehi, the most important thing, and for anyone out here who has experienced abortion or an unplanned pregnancy, because both can carry a lot of guilt and shame, you're not the only one. So many times we feel like we're the only. I remember thinking, I'm the only one ever kicked out of Bible college. I'm the only one dealing with this story. But I've met hundreds of women who are just like me. And there are hundreds, thousands. There are so many women, just you're not the only one. And there is help and healing. And you don't want to go through this grief process by yourself. Find a local pregnancy care center. There is a book called Forgiven and Set Free that's phenomenal, that will walk you through overcoming the shame of abortion. But you know what? Don't do it alone. Do it with somebody. And there are trained people that will come alongside. And as leaders, we can offer this in our churches as a small group model. We can offer this at our conferences. We can offer this kind of training. I love when I go to a conference and someone stands up in the beginning and says, "Hi, I've had an abortion and I'm here to help you. And if you won't need help, you could message me privately and we'll talk."
Yeah.
That's powerful. That not only shows that you're there to help those women, but you're available for that moment before you get pregnant. See, one of the biggest problems I had is, well, I was struggling with my sin. I remember driving in my car and trying to think, who could I tell? Like, who could I tell that I'm going through this? And I went through person after person, and no fault of theirs, fault of my own. I thought, I can't tell them. I can't tell them. I wish I had someone to tell. And I want to be that Christian mom. I want to be that Christian pastor. I want to be that Christian person that young people, that old people, that people can come to and say, I'm sinning, I need help. But if I'm so staunch and I'm so perfect and I portray perfection, people can't come to me with their sins and their problems. So we want to be available after it happens, but we want to be available before too. We want to be those people that someone can say, okay, help. And in the middle of the ugly stuff, to help, not wait till it's over, but in the middle of that, be there to help. So the Forgiven and Set Free, there's also some great programs out there, and I'll send those to you, Sehi, so we could put in the bottom. As a Christian leader, there's an app called Before You Decide. I have it on my phone. I think everyone should have it on their phone. It will help you walk through any woman through their choice of whether they want to keep their child, place their child for adoption, or if they choose abortion. But it walks you through some sonogram pictures of what a baby looks like at the stage that you're at. It walks you through some helpful tools. It's a fantastic app. There's also a group called Embrace Grace, and they throw baby showers at churches. What my church naturally did, there's programs and ways to do that within your church. So if you check out Embrace Grace, they have everything in there. There's another group called Save the Storks that are incredible. They have mobile ultrasound machines that go and park in different spots where women can get on and get a free medical ultrasound and see their baby. That changes everything. So many times women will say, I didn't know it was real, and for me, when I was sitting in that doctor's office 18 years ago, if I didn't know, because my mom hadn't talked to me about it, I wouldn't know that what this doctor who I trusted was saying was false. He was saying it's a clump of cells, but I knew that it was God had formed something inside me. God had formed a child inside me, and I didn't know I had a pastor growing in my belly. And I'm so thankful that God allowed my mom to minister to me, and so I knew. So I kept saying, "No, I'm not getting an abortion." But had I not known those things, and that's where we have the ability to literally show people science ultrasound pictures. Here's what the baby literally looks like in a different ultrasound. So those are all great organizations that are there to help and come alongside us as leaders as we minister to women and to men. The main reason, one of the main reasons that women have abortions is a lack of support, and usually it's lack of support from their parents or their significant other. And if they don't feel like they have support, they feel like this is their only option, backed into a corner. The church is a huge support. We can be there to literally walk with people. And I'll never forget women in my church taking me out to lunch, going with me, helping me, my mom being there and helping me. I was blessed by my church family, and we can be that blessing to people in our community and in our churches.
Wow, Jillian, thank you so much for that powerful story and resources. Yes, we're going to just plug in right in there. So anybody who is needing this resource can tap into it and be that person when somebody can go and unpack all that pain that they're going through. Thank you, Jillian, so
You're welcome.
much. Continue
You're
to
welcome.
be blessed. God bless you. So we're gonna now jump from New York to California, but just wait, because at the end of our conversation, Crystal still has a leadership minute resource she wants to tell you about. So just wait till the end for that. But we're gonna just travel all across the states to land in California to meet with Amy Miranda, and she has a fascinating story. I mean, I don't even know how to even tell you this. This is another great redemption story. So let's just go ahead and invite Amy to the table right here. Hi, Amy. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. So blessed to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. So I hear your name here and there, and everywhere I go, and people are just talking about you've got to talk to Amy because you have such a powerful story, and you're actually an author. You authored a book called Prostitute to Pastor, a woman's journey from the spotlight to God's light. My gosh, that is so catchy. But that's your story, right?
Yes.
And so just share with us, how did this good old church girl turn into a stripper and prostitute? And let's just talk more about it after you answer that question first.
Absolutely. And I love the title, saying the prostitute part, because I always have to let people know that you heard it correctly, that you didn't say Protestant, it was prostitute. No one ever believes that I just put it out there like that. But definitely was not a childhood dream, was not in my diary. No one dreams of pushing a shopping cart and being homeless. No one dreams of taking money for sex. No one dreams of being homeless. Those aren't the dreams of little girls. Little girls want to be doctors or lawyers or mommies, teachers. We have dreams. And I did have a dream of teaching or doing something with music. But about the age of 9, I used to dream of an auditorium and I would be preaching. I
Mm.
could see myself preaching. And, I was born and raised in Indiana. And I had mentioned to my dad, hey, I think I'm going to grow up and be a preacher. And my dad said, oh, honey, women aren't preachers. And it's funny how we were talking about abortion, because I felt like at that moment that dream got aborted. The enemy wants
Mm.
to take the dreams of our heart and he wants to steal them. And
Yeah.
because it's that dream and it's that hope, it's that purpose that he has for us, that, it's kind of this drive, the wind beneath our wings type thing. And the wind got knocked out of me. And so I thought, well, gee, I see a stage and okay, I don't know. I don't know what I'm supposed to do and what I'm supposed to be. And so from that moment on, going through school, I lost my compass. I lost my direction. And my senior year, I just started partying and it was fun. Drinking was
Mm.
fun. Getting lost in that lifestyle was fun. And I thought, I think I'm not going to do the God thing right now, the church thing
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
And I don't want to serve like the devil either. So I'll just be in the middle and I'll just do
Yeah.
my own thing and everything will be fine. And as
Yeah.
we know, there's no middle. It's one or the other.
Right.
But that's the big deceit. And so I literally graduated high school. I moved to Colorado and I started working at the phone company, started doing cocaine, had an affair with a married man,
Yeah.
um, moved to Florida, started doing crank and LSD,
Mm.
ended up in New York. Hi, New York. Ended up in New York. And because of the alcohol and drugs, I wasn't able to get a job during the day. And I looked through ads in the newspaper and I was looking for a job in the evening. And I found one, they were looking for a dancer for bachelor parties. And
Mm.
my background is music. And I thought, huh, I could do that. I could get,
Mm.
some cocaine and some alcohol and I could do that. And I started actually dancing for bachelor parties and I liked feeling beautiful. I
Mm.
liked feeling desired and wanted, that need that we have to be loved by
Yeah.
God. I was seeking
Yeah.
that in man and I
Wow.
fed off of that. And they, would compliment me and say, wow, you're so exotic. You must be, from Canada. And I kept thinking, that is the strangest compliment I've ever had in my life. Why is
Yeah,
Canada exotic?
that's
And
funny.
because the clubs there, the strip clubs there were very exotic. And so I
Mhm.
actually went over there. The thing is when you live a broken life, you make
Yeah,
broken decisions, and then you make
yeah,
more broken decisions. And
yeah.
so I was broken, but there's this sense that wanted to feel whole and beautiful. When I thought, well, upscaling my stripping to a club would make me more exotic
Mm,
and more whole in my mind, is what I thought. And so I
yeah.
started dancing at strip clubs. The lady that originally hired me to do the bachelor parties had a meeting with me, and I actually had a madam, and she said, you're getting a lot of referrals, you're real popular, and it's feeding that whole I'm desired, people want me.
Mm,
And she said, would you be interested in being an escort? The money's really good. Like $500 an hour is what the going
wow.
price was. And when you feel like trash and you think, well, I'll
Mhm,
just put a fur coat over it and I'll feel better. I'll shop and I'll
mhm.
feel better. I'll have a makeover and I'll feel better.
Wow.
There's such a brokenness inside that you have. You just try to mask it with makeup or clothing or
Yeah,
shoes, whatever you can do.
yeah.
And I said, you know what? I'm already broken. I'm already a hot mess. Money will make it better. And I said,
Mhm.
yes. A little girl from Indiana said yes to prostitution. And she trained me. She had some older men that she would send girls through the process, and she would train me into prostitution, and calling it escort made it
Mm,
fancier.
mm,
At the beginning, it was seedy and dark and disgusting and gross.
yeah.
And then you get congressmen and you get professional
Mm,
athletes and you're in fancy
wow.
cars, but it's still dark and it's still seedy and it's still gross, and it doesn't
Mm,
change.
yeah.
And you don't get out because you think, what's the point?
Right.
But I ended up getting pregnant from the DJ of the strip bar that I was dating. I lived upstairs
Mhm.
above the strip bar and I got pregnant.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is the topics that you have going on is I was actually advised, even by family, to just get an abortion. They
Mhm.
just, they had one, just go ahead. It's really simple. And to this day, I can't say why I didn't.
Mm,
The reason I say that is because in prostitution, there are acts and there are things that you do that are so dark. There is
yeah.
no reason. I had no moral compass. There is no
Mm,
reason I shouldn't have just done it. But I had
right.
this thought. I thought, you know what? I've broken my life and there's no hope for me, but
Mm.
there's hope for this baby. And I can't break this baby. That was my thought.
Wow.
So I ended up leaving New York and moving to California to live with my grandmother to raise my baby. Because I
Wow.
got pregnant of the DJ of the strip bar. And I'm pretty sure when my grandmother was praying for me in her little group, I'm pretty sure
Mhm.
that wasn't her exact prayer. It
Right.
wasn't, let her get pregnant by a DJ. That's not her prayer. It was, Lord, just
Mm,
get her, just get her. And that's what it took. That's what it took for me.
mm. Wow. It's amazing. It's almost like a blessing in disguise, that pregnancy,
Yes.
right? And
Yes,
for me, my part of the redemption story is me being deported. And if it wasn't for it, I would never seek God, on my
absolutely.
own. And so I can see that. And moving from being a stripper to a prostitute, now being a pastor, and you're also a police chaplain, that I hear. No
Yes.
one can make this up, right? No one can make this up. It's only God. And his story is so fascinating. And I personally have some people that are stuck in this kind of lifestyle that they want to get out, but they just don't know. And you're kind of very boldly, and I thank you so much for your honesty, authenticity. It's so empowering that you have struggled. What's the point? I have just gone through all this and I'm a hot mess. So what's one more thing could hurt me, and type of thing. But you do have wisdom that you want to share with these young women, or any age woman, right? Uh,
Right.
if they're seeking healing and freedom, what would you tell them?
Well, it's interesting as I travel and I speak, how many women make this comment. They say, my life was exactly like yours. I just didn't get paid.
Wow.
The church especially, it's amazing. I'll have women come up 60, 70 years old, and for the first time they actually think they can actually tell someone. And I think God has just given me a boldness because my faith is in him.
Yes.
And I I have like a crazy faith in him. There is a class called Cleansing Streams that takes you through the process of healing that is very, very, very powerful and lets you look at things. And it's interesting how I'm pretty out there with it. I'll go through a drive-through, and I went to Starbucks, and I was getting a large order, and I was giving her a lot of ones. And I said, "Hey, I know it's like a lot of ones. I'm not a stripper anymore." And she laughed, and I said, "No, I used to be a stripper." And they know me, and they just kind of looked, and I said, "Oh yeah, but God has changed my life." And I'm not afraid to put it out there. There's a speaker I know, she once said, "I'll be the bait and he can be the hook." And it's just my story. And it's a crazy faith, but I think a big part is the way we think.
Yeah.
It's the way we think. We think, I can't ever be anything. I can't ever. We believe lies that aren't truth. And it's very
Yeah.
important to know the truth and know that there is life after. And so I just share freedom in it, not so much to publicly announce it to everyone, but the freedom to not be bound to it. It's shame. It's like having a backpack with rocks of shame and guilt and um,
Yeah.
regret and bitterness. And we just lug it around. We're going to work with our little briefcase or our iPad, and we're sitting there with this weight. We get invited to go to church or go to women's events, and we've got this weight and we don't want to go. And sometimes we don't even recognize what it is. And I
Yeah.
like to show up and go, let me help you unpack it. There's this
Mm.
rock of shame because you had an abortion, or there's a rock of shame because you've had an affair. We all have that rock that we try to carry. Bitterness. My mother is the one that gave me my stripper name. She helped me pick it out.
Oh,
She said, "You're beautiful. You're going to, my mother and I have a great relationship now, but at the beginning, she was
right.
mothering the best that she could. And she
Mm.
thought supporting me in that was the best. But I could have a bitterness towards her because of
Right.
that. I could have regret to have to tell my daughter her biological father is the DJ of a strip bar. But I learned to lay these rocks down. I
Mm.
learned to unburden myself with them and
Yeah.
to not use them as ammo, to throw them
Yeah.
at people, to
Yeah.
throw them at me. And I've learned to lay them down and realize they're stepping stones. And you
Yeah.
literally can walk right over them to the next. Becoming a
Mhm.
police chaplain, I mean, come on. I used to break the law, now I support it. That shouldn't even be a possibility. It should
That's
not
God.
even be. I became a Christian school teacher. I was a teacher for 14 years, and I didn't
Wow.
even finish a degree. And
Wow.
my past is known. I have found that if you put it out first, it's a tool for building, but if you hide it, it's a weapon to destroy. So it's
Wow.
either a
That's
weapon
powerful.
or a tool, but when it's hidden, it's a weapon. So I like to get it out there first, and it can't even be used against me because it's a tool. So that's a big,
Wow.
big part of it. And the lie is, if I tell, things will be ruined.
Mhm.
But the truth is, if you keep it bound, you will be ruined. It's like mold. Mold grows in the dark, it thrives
Right.
in the dark, it's toxic, and it will kill you. But when you expose it to the sun, there's life and there's healing. And that's what
Mhm.
I really encourage people to do, is just to expose it.
Wow. Yeah, bring it to the light. That's been a
Right.
constant theme, isn't it? Wow, that's
Yes.
awesome. So
Yes.
here's my final questions. Maybe you can just give us a brief how-tos. How can Christian leaders, because we're talking about pastors and credentialed ministers or those that are serving in churches, right? How can Christian leaders be more proactive in identifying these vulnerable people and supporting them to devote to God with pure body, mind, and soul? How can we encourage them to do that as leaders in the church?
I think a big part of that is owning where we are and where we came from. We tend to have people that are coming into the church. They look around and they feel like, I can't be here because everyone here is perfect.
Mm.
And it's not that we're going to just air our laundry everywhere, but we just need to be real. And I'm a
Yeah.
big, huge support of life groups or small groups or home groups, whatever you call them. I'm actually an associate pastor that oversees our life groups at church. And I
Mm.
love that because that's where you keep it real. That's
Yeah.
where an Amy Miranda hears somebody say, I've slept with 10 men, and you think, I'm in the hundreds, but you're serving and you've done that. And so I could serve too. That can happen for me. It's in that dialogue and it's keeping it real. But when we act like we're not walking in grace, we need to just display that we're walking in grace, and grace is for everyone, and grace is free, and there's grace for you, and giving opportunities for people to share their stories, because that's a big part of connecting. That's a big part of growth. That's a big part of discipleship. And I believe life groups, home groups, small groups, cell groups, those opportunities, and you get people that are comfortable sharing their story. We're getting ready to do the cardboard testimony for an event, and they have a list of people and what they're going to do, and they just put Amy. They didn't even feel comfortable writing the word prostitute. They
Oh,
couldn't
that's
even
funny.
type it, prostitute. And I don't know if they thought they were going to offend me. I thought, I'm so open, you guys, but it's just funny how we're just so have a lid and a cap on everything. We just need to be open, transparent, authentic, real. If a pastor is struggling with pornography, let them know. Free the men of your church to know that there is hope and there is healing. And if you're struggling through it and making it, they can too. If you've had a divorce or several divorces or abortions, and there's someone that you can share that with, or a small group, you're going to give freedom. It's like walking around with a key and not sharing it. And you're watching people in shackles, and they're bound and they're trapped, and you're holding a key of your story. Your redemption story is a key to their freedom. And if we don't make it about us, and we make it about them, and we're not worried about status and how we look in the church, but it's about souls and the kingdom, let's share those keys of redemption that we got. That's a big part.
Thank you, Amy, so much for your powerful story. I feel so empowered, and you are such a gift to the body of Christ in this generation. So thank you for being you, and continue to just doing an amazing job. We're cheering for you.
Thank you so much.
God bless. Okay, 2 words pop into my mind after just having this amazing conversation: authenticity, accountability. We've got to be authentic, church, our Christian leaders, pastors, right? Let's just be who we are and let the church be authentic. And accountability, we got to be doing this together. We can't do this alone. This is a hard journey, and church is full of broken souls. Perfect place, right? Perfect place for them to be. So thank you for tuning in. Follow them on social media. And if you need them to speak at your churches or different ministries, hey, contact them. Powerful story. More people need to hear their stories. Well, thank you for joining me. To continue to follow us at AG Women Ministers. And here is Crystal with a Leadership Minute.
I was reminded recently of an experience I had sitting in one of my doctorate of ministry classes at AGTS. Dr. Charlie Self was my professor, and he was unpacking. It was an online class, so I would often listen to his lectures just online. He would be speaking, and then I would listen to him, and then we would sometimes meet on Zoom for group lecture and group talk. And I was listening to his lectures, and I really enjoyed the content. But I noticed as I was listening that something else was happening. Dr. Charlie Self was a gifted communicator in a way that I had maybe not heard before from a ministry context. He used very inclusive language. When he was speaking of ministry leaders, he always said men and women. When he was speaking to the audience, he never used terms like guys or brothers. He always used those gender inclusive terms. And even though I didn't notice it at first, the longer I went in classes with him, I realized how this language was beginning to heal me. There was almost a healing process of the acceptance that gender inclusive language was bringing to my heart. And I told him afterwards, I said, Dr. Self, is this something that you've been intentional? Because I think we've all just subliminally We're okay when people just say guys or brethren, or we've learned to reinterpret it to feel included. Yes, we're included, we're sisters. And so we don't take offense at it when we don't have it for the most part. But at the same point, I talked to Dr. Self, and he said, yes, he had worked he'd worked to include, to make sure his language was very inclusive. And so as I share with you today, we've talked about redemption, and I just wanted to mention the redemption of language and how important it is as both men and women that we ensure that when we're talking to mixed audiences, and especially when we're talking about ministry experiences. I remember one time I was praying with a group of pastors for the next lead pastor, and the prayers around the room were, God, bring us the right man of God. And I just think sometimes we don't realize we're Xing out a whole half of our population when we make our language just one dimensional. So today, as we're thinking about redemption, when you talk to people, talk about how we can continue to walk toward inclusive language when we talk about ministry leaders. Thanks for joining us today. Can't wait to see you next time.